You've arrived. The past is waiting for you, and tonight we're going somewhere truly wild. Imagine waking up in a small wooden hut in the middle of Yakutia, the coldest place on Earth. The air is so sharp it almost bites your lungs, and every breath you take feels like frost. I mean, you think your winters are rough? Wait till you hear how people survive where rivers freeze solid and snow stretches for thousands of kilometers. Oh, and if you're enjoying this journey, I'd love it if you gave a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're tuning in from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. It's amazing to think people are listening to this while falling asleep all over the world. All right, find that cozy spot, take a nice slow breath, and just let yourself sink into whatever you're lying on. Tonight, we're stepping into a land where the sun barely rises in winter, where children learn to ride horses almost before they can walk, and where every story is a lesson in surviving the impossible.
Congratulations. You just woke up in a place unlike anywhere you've ever known. Take a deep breath. The air stings your lungs. It is so cold that even the tears in your eyes could turn to ice before they fall. All around you stretches a vast white silence. The snow covers everything. The trees, the rivers, the ground beneath your feet, all wrapped in an endless sheet of frost. You're in the far northeast of Russia. This land has a name, Yakutia, or, as it is also called, the Republic of Sakha. It is the coldest inhabited place on Earth, but do not be fooled. This is not an empty wilderness. Here, people live, they laugh, they sing, they raise children. They find warmth in a world that seems made only of ice. Close your eyes for a moment. Listen. The air is quiet, almost too quiet. No car engines, no airplanes. Only the crunch of frozen snow under your boots, the whistle of a wind that never seems to rest, and the faraway call of a raven. This is the beginning of your journey into Yakutia, a land where survival is not just a necessity, but a way of life. Yakutia is enormous. Imagine a land so wide that it takes up a fifth of all of Russia. It spreads across millions of square kilometers, yet only a few million people live here. Most of them are gathered in small towns or villages, while the rest of the land remains untouched. Silent forests, frozen rivers, mountains that vanish into mist. The winters are cruel. Temperatures plunge to levels most of the world cannot imagine. In the village of Oymyakon, a record was set in 1933, minus 71 degrees Celsius. It is hard to believe a human being can stand such cold, and yet people here do. They wake in the morning, they tend to their animals, they walk to school, they gather wood for fire. Their lives continue, even when the cold tries to stop every breath. But Yakutia is not only a land of ice. In summer the story changes. The snow melts. The sun climbs high in the sky and burns with unexpected heat. Meadows turn green, rivers run free, and flowers bloom on the tundra. For a short season, the temperature can rise to 30 degrees. In those weeks, the people of Yakutia celebrate, because warmth is a gift that never stays long. Long before Russia claimed these lands, another people lived here. They are called the Sakha, or Yakuts. They arrived centuries ago, perhaps travelling from the south, bringing with them their horses, their herds, and their traditions. Over time, they built a culture that was strong enough to survive this frozen land. The Sakha people speak their own language. They tell stories by firelight during the endless nights of winter. Their children grow up learning to ride horses across frozen plains. They believe in spirits that live in the forests, rivers and skies. To them, the land is not just a place. It is alive. It has a soul. Horses are sacred here. Even in this cold, Yakut horses survive, their thick coats protecting them against frost. Cattle are raised too, though they need strong barns to shield them from the weather. In summer, men fish in rivers and lakes, pulling up nets heavy with freshwater fish. In winter, hunters move through the forests, tracking sable, reindeer, and elk. Life is always tied to the land, for the land decides who survives and who does not. Now, imagine walking into a Yakut village. The wooden houses stand strong, built with thick logs to hold in precious warmth. The windows are small, sometimes covered with ice even from the inside. Smoke curls slowly from chimneys, a sign that a family is awake, feeding the fire that is the heart of every home. Inside, it is warm and dim. A stove glows in the centre. Boots, coats and fur hats hang by the door, drying from the frost. A kettle hums on the stove, filling the air with the smell of tea. On the table you might see bread, thick slices of frozen fish, and butter. These are not luxuries. They are daily life. In such cold, food must be rich and filling to give the body strength. Children sit together, their cheeks red from the wind, reading from school books in the Sakha language and in Russian. Elders sit by the fire telling old story of heroes who rode horses across the frozen steppes. In Yakutia, the past is never far away. But life here is not without struggle. In winter, the sun barely rises. There are days when darkness rules almost completely. Imagine waking up to black skies, walking through the dim grey hours, and returning home before the sun has truly shone. The cold does not leave, and the darkness can feel endless. Yet people endure. They light fires, they sing, they gather in homes and celebrate holidays. They remind themselves that light will return, that winter will end. In this way, they survive not just with strength, but with hope. Beneath the frozen soil of Yakutia lies another story. Riches, diamonds, gold, coal. In the 20th century, miners came to dig into this hard ground. Towns grew near the mines, filled with workers who braved the cold to reach the treasures below. The world's diamonds, glittering in crowns and rings, often come from this silent, icy land. Still, outside these mining towns, Yakutia remains mostly wild. The forests stretch untouched, the rivers run clear, and the air, though bitter, carries a silence so deep it feels eternal. Yakutia is not a place that forgives weakness. To live here is to face a test every day. The test of cold, the test of hunger, the test of loneliness. But the people endure, and in that endurance they find meaning. For them, Yakutia is not just survival. It is home. It is where their ancestors lived, where their children are born, and where stories never stop. The story of Yakutia does not end here. It only begins. To understand it more deeply, we must go further, into the lives of the Sakha, into their ancient traditions, into the wars that swept across Siberia, and into the way this land shaped every soul who dared to live here. So, let us step deeper into the past, into the rhythm of life in a frozen empire. You've walked deeper into Yakutia. The snow is falling gently tonight, soft and silent, as though the sky itself is breathing. In the distance, a small village glows with the warm orange light of fires burning inside wooden homes. Smoke drifts into the night, carrying the smell of pine and birch. You step closer, and now you are no longer just a traveller. You are a guest in the world of the Sakha people. Inside one of the houses, the family gathers around a large iron stove. This stove is the heart of their world. Without it, the cold would claim them. Children sit cross-legged on rugs made of reindeer hide, their cheeks glowing with heat after hours of running through snow. Their grandmother speaks in a soft, steady voice, telling an old tale. It is the tale of how the earth was born. In the beginning there was only endless sky, but from the heavens came a white eagle, soaring with great wings. The eagle looked down and saw nothing but water, so it sent a duck to dive beneath the waves. The duck returned with a handful of earth in its beak, and from that earth, land was formed. The Saka children listen with wide eyes. In their world, the land, the animals, the rivers, all are alive, all are part of a great spirit. The Saka believe in 3 worlds: the upper world of light and good spirits, the middle world where humans live, and the lower world of darkness and mischief. Shamanic rituals once guided the people, with drums echoing into the forests at night. Even now, traces of these old beliefs live on, woven into festivals and stories. Life here follows the rhythm of the seasons. In summer, when the days are long and the sun hardly sets, the Saka hold their most important celebration, the Siak festival. It is a festival of renewal, of welcoming the warmth and the sun. People gather in open fields. They wear bright clothes, embroidered with patterns of horses and stars. A tall wooden pole, the surge, is placed in the ground, decorated with ribbons. Around it, dancers move in circles, their steps gentle, steady, like the beating of a heart. The air smells of fermented mare's milk, called kumis, a sacred drink of the Saka. Children laugh and chase each other through the grass. Elders raise their hands to the sky, offering prayers to the spirits of nature. And when the singing begins, it carries for miles, voices rising together, strong and proud, echoing against the endless blue sky. But when winter returns, the rhythm changes. The land falls silent again. Villages shrink into themselves. Families rely on frozen fish, stored meats, and bread baked in heavy ovens. Work becomes slower, but no less important. Men cut firewood. Horses are fed with hay gathered in the brief summer. Women sew thick fur coats and felt boots. Children learn to write by candlelight, the frost crawling across their windows. What do people eat in such a place? Food is not only about taste here, it is about survival. The Saka diet is heavy with meat and fish, rich in fat to fight the cold. Imagine sitting at a wooden table where dishes are simple but powerful. There is stroganoian, raw fish sliced thin, still frozen, eaten like ribbons of ice. There is horse meat, boiled or smoked, and dairy from hardy Yakut cattle. In summer, berries grow in wild abundance: blueberries, lingonberries, and cloudberries. Families gather them by the bucket, preserving them for winter. Honey from northern bees is treasured, golden and thick, and always there is tea, hot, dark, and endless. Cups are refilled again and again, for warmth must flow constantly, like the fire in the stove. Step outside with the Saka in midwinter, and you will see how carefully they dress. Clothing here is not fashion. It is armour against the cold. Coats made from horsehide and reindeer fur. Boots lined with felt and thick wool. Hats with flaps that cover the ears and cheeks. Even the horses wear coverings, their breath rising like smoke in the icy air. Every layer is chosen with care. A mistake could mean frostbite within minutes. But still, the Saka make their clothes beautiful. Bright beads, embroidered patterns, and silver ornaments turn these garments into more than protection. They're also symbols of pride, carrying the memory of generations before. Now imagine being a child here. You wake before the sun rises, though in winter that might mean you rise in darkness and go to bed in darkness too. You put on your layers of wool and fur. Your eyelashes freeze as soon as you step outside. The walk to school is short, but the cold is sharp, biting at your nose and fingers. Inside the classroom you sit with other children, learning Russian and Sakha, numbers and stories, history and songs. Playtime is no less fierce. Children skate on frozen rivers, their laughter echoing over the ice. They ride small, strong horses across the snow, learning skills their ancestors mastered centuries ago. In the evening they return home to warm soup, family stories, and soft furs to sleep under. Childhood here is not easy, but it is rich, filled with the closeness of family, the wonder of endless skies, and the deep knowledge that survival is a shared gift. Yet life in Yakutia has not always been peaceful. Centuries ago, when Russian explorers and settlers moved eastward, they entered these lands. The meeting was not always kind. The Sakha resisted, but the empire was vast and Yakutia was drawn into Russia's long shadow. Taxes were demanded, battles fought, and new rulers claimed authority. Over time, the Sakha blended their ways with Russian ways, keeping their language and traditions alive even as new laws, schools, and faith spread. By the 20th century, Yakutia became part of the Soviet Union. Industries grew, mines opened, and towns were built. But with that came hardship too. Families were forced to leave nomadic lives. Shamans were silenced. The rhythm of the land was broken by the hum of machines. Yet even then, the Sakha spirit endured. The stories never stopped. The festivals returned. And today, the people of Yakutia still live between two worlds, the modern and the ancient, the Russian and the Sakha. Step outside once more, into the night, look up. Above Yakutia, the sky is wide and endless. In winter, the northern lights dance. Green, purple, and blue curtains of fire moving silently across the heavens. The Sakha once believed these lights were spirits playing in the sky, a reminder that the world above is alive. The wind is sharp and the snow crunches under your boots. But as you walk through the silence, you feel something deeper. This land is not only cold, it is powerful. It tests you, yes, but it also holds you, if you respect it. For the Sakha, this frozen world is not a prison. It is a story, told again and again, through generations that refuse to let it fade. And so the story continues. In the next step of our journey, we will look closer at the struggles that shaped this land. The great freezes, the explorers who dared cross Siberia, the wars, and the treasures hidden beneath the ice. The land of Yakutia waits, and its tale is far from over. The air is the same, sharp, frozen, cutting like a knife. But something is different now. The quiet rhythm of the Sakha people is about to be disturbed. New voices are moving across Siberia, carried on sleds, horses, and boats. These are not hunters or herders. They are strangers, explorers, traders, and soldiers sent by a rising power to claim this endless land. Far to the west in Moscow, the Tsars dreamed of empire. Russia was still young, but it was growing, always pushing outward. To the east lay forests without end, rivers that stretched beyond maps, and whispers of wealth, furs, gold, silver, and even the possibility of reaching China. So the Tsars sent their men, the Cossacks, fierce riders, hardened fighters, carrying muskets and sabres. They travelled by riverboats in summer, on sleds in winter, following waterways deeper into Siberia. Step by step, year by year, they reached new lands. And one day, they crossed into Yakutia. The Saka people, who had lived here for centuries, now saw strangers riding across their frozen plains. At first, the encounters were uncertain. Some tribes offered food and trade, curious about these newcomers. Others resisted, seeing the threat they carried. But the Cossacks were not only explorers, they came with orders. The Tsars demanded tribute. Not gold, not silvers, but fur. Soft, warm, valuable fur known as yasak. Sable, fox, ermine. The kind of fur that kings and queens in Europe wore on their robes. For the Saka, hunting had always been a way of life, but now it became a tax. Each year, families were forced to give fur to the empire. Refusal was punished. Imagine the tension. A Saka hunter returns from the forest with his catch. Before, it would have fed his family, clothed his children, and honoured his ancestors. Now, much of it must go to men with muskets, men who speak another tongue, men who serve a ruler thousands of miles away. There were uprisings, villages fought back, but the Cossacks were ruthless, and the empire's reach grew stronger. By the mid-17th century, Yakutia was no longer only Saka land. It was a Russian territory, claimed by distant rulers who had never felt its cold. But history is never simple. Conquest does not only destroy, it also changes both sides. As Russian settlers and officials moved into Yakutia, they built small towns along the rivers, Yakutsk, Verkhoyansk, and others. Wooden forts rose, their walls sharp against the snow. Churches appeared, their bells echoing through the frost. Yet the Russians could not simply erase the Saka way of life. The land was too vast, the cold too strong. Instead, both worlds began to mix. Russian traders married Saka women. Children grew up speaking both languages. Russian icons were placed in homes, but beside them, Saka amulets still hung. The old spirits of the land were not so easily forgotten. As the centuries passed, Yakutia gained a new role in the empire. It became a place of exile. Rebels, thinkers and criminals from Western Russia were sent east, punished by being cast into the frozen lands. Imagine a man from Moscow, used to cobbled streets and warm houses, stepping off a sled in Yakutia. The cold steals his breath. The silence frightens him. Yet this is now his prison. Some of these exiles were dangerous men. Others were poets, dreamers, and rebels against the Tsar. They carried books, ideas, and songs. And so, even in punishment, Yakutia became a meeting place of cultures. New words, new thoughts, new ways of life seeped into the land, mixing with Saka traditions and Russian rule. Still, beneath these grand movements of empire, daily life remained much the same. The Saka rose each morning to feed their horses, to cut wood, to fish through ice. Russian settlers struggled just as hard, building homes that could withstand the cold, praying their crops would grow in the short summers. The land did not care who ruled it. The land was the true master. For every man who dreamed of wealth, there was the danger of frostbite, hunger, or being lost in the endless forests. For every official who demanded tribute, there was the silence of a winter night, reminding him that power means nothing against 70 degrees below zero. Yet, despite the hardships, the push eastward never stopped. Beyond Yakutia lay even more mysteries: the Pacific Ocean, China, Japan, and the dream of trade with lands of silk and spices. Yakutia became a passageway, a frozen bridge across Siberia. Caravans of sleds, laden with goods, crossed its rivers. Explorers mapped its mountains and valleys, often at the cost of their lives. For the Saka, this meant constant change. New faces arrived every year. Some stayed, building villages and mines. Others passed through, leaving only footprints in the snow. The world that had once been only theirs was now shared, reshaped, and transformed. Yet through it all, the Saka spirit endured. Families still gathered around fuckers to tell stories. Shamans still beat their drums in hidden groves, calling to the spirits of sky and earth. Children still grew up learning the songs of their ancestors, even as they learned new prayers in Russian churches. The Empire could demand tribute, build forts, and send settlers, but it could not take the soul of Yakutia. The cold itself seemed to protect it, as though the land whispered, "Only those who truly belong may survive here." Now the centuries turn, the 18th becomes the 19th, Russia grows larger, richer, and more powerful. But Yakutia remains what it has always been: vast, silent, frozen, and unbroken. The Tsars may rule from afar, but here life follows its own rhythm. The slow beat of hooves across frozen earth, the crackle of fires in log houses, the voices of children echoing into a white sky. And in the distance, a new age is coming. An age of revolutions, machines, and wars that will reach even this faraway land. The story of Yakutia is not finished. It has only begun. The snow still stretches for thousands of kilometers, the rivers still freeze solid in winter, and the northern lights still dance across the skies. But the world of Yakutia is shifting. The Russian Empire now rules firmly over these lands, and with its rule come new faces, new burdens, and new secrets hidden deep beneath the ice. For the Tsars in faraway St. Petersburg, Yakutia was more than a province. It was a place to send those who troubled the empire. Rebels, thinkers, criminals, and dreamers were all banished to Siberia, many of them to Yakutia itself. Imagine the long journey. Weeks, sometimes months, chained or guarded, dragged across endless roads until they reached the frozen east. For some, this was punishment worse than prison. The cold gnawed at their bones. Food was scarce, life was hard, and the silence seemed endless. But others, especially writers, teachers, and scholars, found something unexpected here. They met the Saka, they studied the land, and sometimes they even admired the strength of the people who endured where most men would fall. The villages of Yakutia became places where exiles told stories of distant revolutions, of books and ideas forbidden in the West. Children of Saka families sometimes listened, learning words of philosophy alongside the old tales of the eagle and the duck. Yakutia, though isolated, was never cut off. The empire poured its outcasts into the land, and with them came knowledge. In this same century, explorers and scientists also crossed Yakutia. Some came to map the land, tracing rivers that had no names on European charts. Others studied the strange animals of the frozen earth. Fossils of mammoths, great beasts that had walked during the Ice Age, were found buried in permafrost. Their tusks, still ivory white, were dug from the ground and shipped west. Proof that Yakutia was not only alive, but also a keeper of the ancient past. Geologists arrived too, curious about the mountains and rivers. They took samples of rock, scratched at the frozen soil, and whispered of treasures hidden below. For now, the land remained quiet, but its riches were waiting. The Saka had always known their land was strange. Sometimes the earth gave up shining stones, clear and sharp. To them, these were curiosities, symbols of the spirits of the underworld, but to the Empire, they were wealth. By the end of the century, rumours grew louder: gold in the rivers, diamonds in the ground, coal under the frozen soil. Prospectors came, digging, searching, testing the earth. Some struck lucky, their pockets heavy with gold dust. Others froze in the snow, their dreams buried with them. Yakutia was becoming more than exile. It was becoming a treasure chest locked under layers of frost, waiting for the key of industry. And yet, for most Sakar families, life continued as it always had. Children still learned to ride hardy Yakut horses across the steppe. Men still hunted and fished, setting traps in the forest and nets beneath the ice. Women still churned milk into butter, sewed fur coats, and told the children stories in the flicker of firelight. But change crept in slowly. Russian schools were built in villages. Priests walked from house to house, teaching the Orthodox faith. Some families embraced the cross, while others held tightly to the spirits of their ancestors. Most lived in both worlds, baptizing their children in churches, yet whispering old prayers to the river when spring ice broke. Still, the land itself remained the greatest ruler. Winters froze entire herds. Famines struck when hunting failed. In some years, entire villages moved, searching for better land, leaving behind empty homes that vanished into the snow. And yet there was beauty too. In summer, the meadows bloomed with wildflowers. Festivals filled the air with music. The Isyak festival grew larger, drawing crowds to dance beneath the open sky, to drink kumis, and to honour the spirits of the sun. For the Sakar, survival was never just about food or shelter. It was about spirit, about holding on to joy even when the earth seemed determined to take it away. By the late 1800s, the Russian Empire was changing. Railways were being built across Siberia, connecting distant lands to Moscow and St. Petersburg. News travelled faster, and in Yakutia, whispers of revolution reached even the frozen villages. Exiles spoke of freedom, of new governments, of a Russia without czars. These ideas floated in the cold air, mixing with smoke from fires, with prayers to spirits, with the dreams of children staring at the northern lights. The Sakar too began to ask questions. What would their future be? Would they remain only hunters, herders and villagers, or would the Empire's machines and mines change everything? The 19th century was ending. A storm was building in Russia, a storm that would reach every corner of the land, even the frozen heart of Yakutia. Tonight, the village sleeps. Dogs curl beside stoves. Families rest under heavy furs. The stars shine above, cold and sharp. The land seems still, but history is moving. In only a few years, the Empire will fall. Wars will burn across Russia, and Yakutia will be drawn into the greatest upheaval it has ever known. The story of exile and treasure will give way to a new story, of revolution, industry, and survival in the shadow of a new power, the Soviet Union. And so, the tale moves forward. The snow is the same, the cold just as sharp, but the empire of the Tsars is gone. Russia has fallen into revolution, and in its place rises a new power, the Soviet Union. Red flags flutter over Moscow, armies march, and even here, thousands of kilometers away, Yakutia feels the tremors of change. In 1922, the Republic of Sakar, Yakutia, is declared part of the Soviet Union. On paper, it is given autonomy, a place within the vast family of Soviet republics. But in truth, Moscow's hand is firm. New rulers come with promises, schools for every child, hospitals for the sick, factories for the workers. The old ways, they say, must give way to progress. For the Sakar, this is both hope and fear. Some welcome education and medicine. Others see their traditions pushed aside, their shamans silenced, their festivals called superstition. The rhythm of life begins to shift, pulled between memory and the demands of a new world. Then comes the darkest chapter. In the 1930s, under Joseph Stalin, Yakutia becomes one of the many places chosen for labor camps. Men and women from across the Soviet Union, prisoners, rebels, innocents accused of crimes, are sent east in chains. They arrive in Yakutia to dig mines, cut timber, and build settlements in the cruelest cold on earth. Imagine their suffering. Prisoners marched into forests where the temperature was 50 below zero, forced to chop wood until their hands bled. Others dug into frozen earth with picks that broke on the permafrost, searching for coal, gold, and diamonds. Many did not survive. Their bodies were swallowed by the snow, their names forgotten. For the locals, the camps brought fear but also change. Roads were built, towns expanded, and slowly Yakutia became tied tighter to the Soviet machine. It was in this century that Yakutia revealed one of its greatest secrets: diamonds. In the 1950s, geologists confirmed what whispers had long suggested: the land was rich with these shining stones. Soon mines opened, first small, then vast. One of them, the Mir mine, grew into a giant pit so deep it seemed to swallow the sky. From Yakutia's frozen soil came gems that travelled the world, glittering in rings and crowns, symbols of wealth dug from a land of poverty and frost. The Soviet Union poured workers and resources into Yakutia. New towns rose: Mirny, Udakhny, Aikal. Airstrips were carved into permafrost. Schools, theatres and factories appeared where once there had been only silence. But all of it came with cost. The land was scarred, families were uprooted, and the Saka way of life, hunting, herding, storytelling under the stars, grew harder to keep alive. Yet even under Moscow's watchful eye, daily life carried on. Children in Yakutia grew up singing Soviet songs at school assemblies, reciting the names of Lenin and Stalin. They learned to salute the red flag, to speak Russian fluently. But at home, their grandparents still whispered old stories, still spoke Saka, still lit candles for spirits of river and sky. Two worlds side by side. Food came from rations and collective farms. In towns, bread was bought from Soviet bakeries, and workers queued for meat and sugar. In villages, families still relied on frozen fish, berries, and horse meat. The cold did not change. Winter still froze pipes solid, and frost still crept across windows. The Soviet Union could build factories, but it could not conquer the weather. The Soviet years were not kind to the old traditions. Shamans, once the healers and spiritual leaders of the Saka, were arrested, mocked, or forced into silence. Ancient rituals were banned. Temples and sacred groves were cut down or left forgotten. The state allowed no rival to its ideology, and yet, in quiet corners, traditions endured. Families passed songs to children in secret. Elders taught the meaning of spirits in whispers. Even as propaganda filled the air, the people of Yakutia remembered. The land itself seemed to protect its spirit. The cold was too deep, the forest too wide, for Moscow to erase everything. In 1941, when Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union, Yakutia once again gave more than it received. Men from this frozen land marched thousands of kilometers west to fight in battles they had never seen before. Many never returned. At home, women and elders kept the villages alive, working in the mines, tending to animals and feeding the children. The war drained Yakutia, but it also tied it closer to the rest of the Soviet Union. No longer just a distant province, it was now part of a shared sacrifice, remembered in monuments that still stand in its villages today. By the 1970s and 80s, Yakutia was both ancient and modern. In the cities, Soviet apartment blocks rose, grey and square against the snow. Factories belched smoke. Trains and airplanes connected people to Moscow. Children grew up with television sets, cartoons, and the dream of becoming engineers or scientists. But in the countryside, families still gathered firewood. Horses still pawed the snow for grass. And every summer, when the short warmth returned, the people of Yakutia still celebrated Isyak, dancing under the sun, raising their hands to the sky, remembering that life is more than survival. For Moscow, Yakutia was treasure. Diamonds, gold, coal and oil. For the people who lived here, it was home. Hard, cold and beautiful. The Soviet Union claimed to have tamed this land. But those who lived here knew the truth. Yakutia could never be tamed. It could only be endured, respected and loved. And as the 20th century drew to its end, another storm gathered. The Soviet Union itself began to crack. When it fell in 1991, Yakutia once again stood at a crossroads, no longer a distant republic of an empire, but a part of a new Russia, carrying its own dreams into the uncertain years ahead. The story of Yakutia does not pause here. This Soviet chapter is over, but the land's tale stretches onward, into the modern age, where traditions awaken again, where the wealth of diamonds clashes with poverty, and where the people of the coldest place on earth still laugh, sing and survive. The red flag of the Soviet Union has been lowered for the last time. In its place, a new Russia rises, confused, uncertain, searching for its path. For Yakutia, this moment is like a second birth. No longer just a distant province under Moscow's command, it now stands as the Republic of Sakha, with its own voice, its own flag, and the dream of shaping its own destiny. In the early 1990s, hope filled the air. For the first time in generations, the Sakha language was celebrated openly. Schools taught not only Russian, but Sakha too. Festivals long silenced by Soviet power returned to life. At Isyak, the great summer festival, crowds danced under the midnight sun. Men wore traditional robes, women sang ancient songs, and children listened wide-eyed as elders told the stories of heroes and spirits. There was a sense of awakening, as if the land itself breathed more freely. Sacred groves were honoured again. Shamans returned, their drums echoing in the night. A people long told to forget their past were now remembering it. But freedom came with pain. The Soviet Union had held Yakutia together with its industry, its subsidies, its planned economy. When that collapsed, so too did much of daily life. Factories closed, shops stood empty, families waited in long lines for bread and milk. Salaries went unpaid for months. Many people, once proud workers of mines and farms, suddenly had nothing. The cold did not care for politics. Winters still dropped to -50. Pipes still froze. Children still needed warm boots. In some villages, people survived only because they returned to the old ways, fishing through the ice, hunting in the forests, sharing what little they had with neighbours. It was a time of endurance, and of rediscovering how much strength was hidden in community. Through all the uncertainty, one thing never lost its shine: diamonds. The mines of Yakutia still held treasures beyond imagination. In the 1990s, new companies rose to take control of these riches, chief among them Alrosa, a giant diamond enterprise. The gems left Yakutia for Moscow, for Europe, for New York, glittering in shops, sold at auctions, worn by the wealthy. For many in Yakutia, though, the diamonds felt distant. The wealth flowed outward, but life in villages and towns often remained poor. Streets cracked, schools lacked supplies, families heated homes with wood stoves, just as their ancestors had centuries before. The land was rich, but its people often lived with little, and yet Yakutia in the modern age was never only about struggle. In the cities, Yakutsk above all, a new culture bloomed. Universities taught science and engineering, but also Saka literature and history. Young musicians blended traditional throat singing with guitars and electronic beats. Painters filled canvases with images of frost, horses, and spirits. Filmmakers told stories of survival and love in the land of eternal winter. Yakutsk itself became a city of paradoxes. Concrete apartment blocks standing beside wooden houses, children with smartphones walking past frozen horses tied to posts, neon lights glowing while frost smoke curled from chimneys. Even in deep cold, life pulsed with energy. No matter how modern the world becomes, the cold never loosens its grip. Cars in Yakutsk cannot be left outside overnight without their engines running, or they will freeze solid. People wear fur hats, heavy coats, boots lined with reindeer hide. Eyelashes turn white with frost in minutes. Cell phones shut down in the icy air. And yet, in this place, people still laugh. They meet in warm kitchens, sharing tea brewed strong and black, eating frozen fish sliced like glass. Children skate on rivers turned to ice. Families celebrate weddings with music, dancing long into the endless night. The cold is not only an enemy, it is also a teacher, a reminder of how fragile and how strong human life can be. As the years passed into the 2000s, Yakutia began to find its balance. The government of the Republic of Saka gained more authority. The Saka language grew stronger, spoken proudly by younger generations. Schools taught both Russian and Saka side by side. Artists and writers created a renaissance of culture, reminding the world that Yakutia is not only a land of cold, but also a land of beauty, wisdom, and resilience. But the challenges never disappeared. Poverty lingered in many villages. Young people often left for Moscow or beyond, searching for opportunity. The land itself, rich in resources, was mined and drilled, sometimes without care for the forests, rivers, or the fragile permafrost. Climate change too brought new dangers, as the once eternal ice began to melt, threatening both buildings and traditions. And still, life continued. In Yakutia today, you can see grandmothers telling fairy tales to children while frost gathers outside their windows. You can see horse herders leading animals across snowy plains. You can see students streaming into universities in Yakutsk, dreaming of becoming doctors, engineers, or artists. Everywhere, the same spirit remains, the will to endure, to laugh, to celebrate even when the world turns hard. Yakutia has never been an easy place, but those who live here know something others often forget, that life's meaning is not only comfort, but strength, memory, and connection. And so Yakutia stands in our present day, its people walking the thin line between the past and the future. Diamonds still glitter in the soil, ancient songs still rise under the endless sky, and the cold, the great cold, still surrounds everything, as it always has, and as it always will. You're no longer in a city, no longer in a modern world of roads and engines. You're sitting inside a wooden house in a small village, far across the frozen rivers. Outside the night is black and heavy. The frost whispers against the window like tiny claws of ice. But here, In the glow of the hearth, warmth gathers. An old man with silver hair sits across from you. He takes a deep breath. His eyes reflect the fire, and then, in a voice both calm and steady, he begins. Long before Russia, long before cities, long before even the first horses came, the world was divided into three. The upper world, the realm of the bright gods of the sky. The middle world, where we humans live, walking upon the earth, hunting, loving and dying. And the lower world, a dark place of shadows and restless spirits. Between these worlds stood the great world tree, tall as the heavens, roots as deep as forever. At its base our people were born. From its branches the gods looked down upon us, and beneath its roots the shadows whispered. We, the Saka, were given this land to live in, the land of snow, rivers, and endless sky. And though it is harsh, it is also sacred. The spirits watch us always. He leans closer, his voice softer. In the upper world lives Urungai Toyon, the great creator, lord of light. It was he who gave the Saka their breath, their spirit. With him dwell bright gods of fire, of sun, of song. In summer, when the sun burns high and the grass grows green, their blessing shines upon us. Yisiak, our great festival, is a gift to them. We raise our hands to the sky. We drink kumis, the fermented milk of the mare, and we sing to remind them we remember. He smiles faintly, as if recalling dances beneath the sun. But not all spirits live in the sky. Here, in the middle world, every river, every mountain, every tree has its own ishchi, its soul. When we drink from the river, we must bow. When we hunt, we must give thanks, for the land listens. The forest has guardians, the wind carries whispers, and the fire itself is alive. That is why even today we feed the fire a little milk, a little fat, so it knows we honour it. If we forget, the spirits grow angry, and in a land this cold, you cannot afford to make the spirits angry. The fire cracks as if agreeing. The old man's voice lowers, and then there is the lower world, the place of Erlik, the Dark Lord. From there come the Abasi, evil spirits, cruel and hungry. They bring sickness, they twist the heart. Sometimes they steal the breath of a man in his sleep, leaving him weak, or take the soul of a child before it can grow strong. In old days, our shamans, the Oyun, fought them. They beat their drums, calling the spirits of ancestors, climbing in their visions up the world tree to the sky, or down into the depths to wrestle with the Abasi. It was dangerous work. A shaman could lose himself in the journey, but without them, who would guard the village? Now his hands move, shaping an unseen circle. Sleep now. Let yourself sink deeper into that perfect relaxation. Your eyelids are heavy. So heavy it would take too much effort to open them now. Your limbs feel pleasantly weighted, impossible to move even if you wanted to, which you don't. You just want to drift all the way down into deep, restful sleep. That's it. Just let go completely. The day is done. The work is finished. Nothing more required of you now except to rest, to renew, to dream perhaps of different possibilities, different worlds. But for now, just sleep deep and peaceful, easy and calm. Sleep now. Sleep well, drifting deeper with each breath down and down into perfect, complete rest.